Okay, so here I am now with Paley Boucher from Rocket Dog Rescue, and who is one of our contestants to receive donations from SuperDoge. Paley, I know that you spoke already to some of our community members, but I'm going to just kind of let you go ahead, and if you can tell us how you ended up starting Rocket Dog, kind of a bit about your childhood, where you came from, how you ended up,
Yeah,
devoting your life to saving animals, and where you're going and what you do with donations if you're doing it from SuperDoge. I'll let you take it from here.
yeah. Thank you so much for having us on again.
Sure.
For the people that had already tuned in and heard some story, for those who maybe hadn't heard, I was born homeless on the street to a drug addicted mother, and my life was one of like absolute chaos and uncertainty. And as a child, I had never had any source of kindness or nurturing, and um there was a few times that I was put into foster homes, but that was more disorienting than anything. I didn't know how to accept or understand kindness at that point in my life. And um, I mean, that this point actually becomes really important later in my life because it somehow enabled me to understand those that might be forgotten or left behind or neglected or, and I feel this on a hugely personal level. So I believe that, as I had started this path, as I became more involved with like animal rights and rescue, I would see story after story of these animals that had been, killed at shelters that without anybody ever having known them. They sat in those shelters completely unseen, and they lived and they died there without ever feeling, a kind or a soft presence in their life. And I understand that with every fiber of my being, and I do understand that, as I became more involved, I couldn't look away from that. I couldn't turn away from it. I realized, you know, that this is what I was meant to do. And I made the decision to devote my life to helping and rescue and protecting the vulnerable, either animals or people. But it was a very clear moment where I was like, this is where I need to be. This is what I'm here for. And, I started this nonprofit when I had nothing. I'd been living my whole life out on the streets. I didn't have skills. I didn't have, uh, I didn't have a lot, right? And the minute I got a place, a safe place, I knew that that's is where that this was. I was just going to devote my life to this, and every single day, you know, I took a step further. I was rescuing animals. I was like helping with homeless and stuff. And we started building this nonprofit. It was quite small. There was just a handful of volunteers, no money. I would sit down on the corner of 18th and Castro on a milk crate holding 5 dogs, and people would walk by and I'd talk to them, and eventually they would sit down and hold a dog with me. They'd go find a milk crate and sit with me. And it was very, very grassroots, simple and organic. Um, one by one, people would connect. They would feel a spark of something that felt true and they wanted to join in. And we gradually, with a ton of nonstop work and dedication, we built this organization into something solid and real. Uh, I mean, we started out saving dogs, a handful of dogs from shelters. And as we learned more and created a more stable base, we were starting to create something that really, made a difference and created real change. you know um so that's like the emotional aspect of what we do in this rescue and where it was born from and why my early experiences of being, just like, you know afraid and unseen, and how that can enable me to recognize that in an animal or in a person, and just be able to slow everything down and be, understand that moment for them. And that's, you know um you know so we get a million mazillion meetings and workshops and seminars, and we're working literally every day, and we learn really quite naturally where we want to be in the world, what we wanted this organization to be. And you know the volunteers that join in, they recognize something, I think, that they might not find somewhere else in the world. um I feel that I had my own hurt and brokenhearted feelings of uncertainty and not really sure, that I had a good understanding of my life or where I was supposed to be. And I feel like on a lot of levels, many people might experience that. And there's something about setting that down, just putting it aside for a few hours and just really just focusing on somebody that is in a that is about to fall through the cracks, that is about to fail, and just giving them your all and helping to change the direction of that. And I think it rings true for a lot of the volunteers. I think that's there's something about it that broken or hurt or dinged up hearts, whatever it is. And I don't think there's a lot in this world that could bring that, that can bring that. So fast forward 20 years, we've been doing this. We've saved the lives of over 15,000 animals. We're called in as first responders in hoarding cases, natural disasters, trauma, extreme neglect and abuse. We're called by the Red Cross when there are fires and people, are evacuated from their homes, and need temporary housing for their animals. We get calls weekly from hospitals that there's people that need to go in to the hospital, but they won't unless their animals are safe. So we take care of them until they can get out. You know, we call into fire zones. There's 100 different ways where our day might unfold. You wake up in the morning and you think, oh, I'm just going to go to the sanctuary and meet with some people. And by the end of the day, you might be driving into a hoarding case of 25 chihuahuas that, are left in an abandoned building. It's kind of it's a very interesting way to live your life. Um,
Wow, that does sound
yeah,
very interesting. Yeah, you just never know what's going to happen from day to day.
yeah, yep.
Wow, 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 wow. And I know from hearing from people who've worked with you that you've had to jump into the middle of many dogs fighting and so on. How many times have you been bitten? I always want to ask you this.
Yeah. Well, I've been bitten many times, but not normally because a dog is flat out aggressive. Like, I've been, you have to go into a home where maybe the person had passed away or moved away, and you have to like go into a home late at night, and there's an animal hiding in the backyard, and you have to be able to like catch them and get them to safety and get them to trust you. And I've had some pretty bad bites to the face. I've had dogs injured, animals that have been hit by cars, and you wrap them up and you try and keep them very safe and contained until you can rush them to the emergency vet. And I've been I've been in some pretty like hairy situations, and you just gotta, you know, I've learned some pretty good evasive behaviors for that. But I've been bitten quite a few times, and never. It always felt like, yeah, it never scared me away from jumping into an emergency again, though.
Sure, sure, sure. And tell me this: when did you really feel like that? That you had something in common. Like, what was it that you saw in animals from like you were younger and so on that kind of gave you more trust and more, compassion towards animals?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, there's a little bit of noise.
Yeah. So, when you were younger and you kind of, you started with animals, like what was it that you kind of, you could see the compassion in animals? What gave you more
Yeah.
compassion in animals?
I have to tell you, I lived alone out there. I lived in abandoned buildings. I live in old train tracks down by the junkyards, and I was, I would wander alone in the moonlight along the water's edge, along the train tracks, and the junkyard dogs would follow me, and the feral cats, and I would find little animals that were injured or pigeons that were hurt, and I would nurse them back to health. And that's where all of the fear and uncertainty of being out there and being in these like areas that were really rough and like, violent and just chaotic. And that's in those moments of like sitting there with all the junkyard dogs or holding a little pigeon that was like, needed to be fed and needed water. That's where I felt myself like a shield from all of the chaos. It would just like, I would be just me and this animal in this like peaceful bubble in this space. And it really quieted my heart and helped me feel like, I'm here for them. And I think that in turn that that gave me an understanding that there was more out in this world. There was more. I became very dissatisfied with the daily like chaos and violence and police and you know people robbing you, whatever would come my way. I i became more protective of myself. But the real change for me happened. I used to go to the shelters. The SPCA back then was the city shelter that was quite overcrowded. And I went one day, and there was a blood black and tan hound, and he was like looking straight into my eyes, and I kept trying to walk away from him, and I just go back and I'd look at him, and he was like just sending me this like intense like energy. Like I knew I had to get him out of there. And I asked the lady about him what his story was, and she said that he was out of time and he was going to be euthanized. And I got him out of there. I found a way to adopt him, and I wasn't looking to adopt an animal. I could barely even take care of myself. And but I couldn't leave him. I couldn't leave him behind. So when I took him home, it was such a weight of responsibility. I couldn't let anything happen to him, that I started taking better. I'd move out away from the chaos and the people. I'd move away out to these like little quieter areas, and it was just me and him. And I was so focused on taking care of him that in turn, without me realizing, I took better care of myself. I made sure he had water. I made sure he had food, which I never had actually done for myself. And I
Wow.
he that dog in that moment like saved my life. And i and that it was a very riveting like place for me, because I knew I couldn't let anything happen to him, and in turn I protected myself and him. you know um and when this nonprofit, after years and years of us living out there, I became like, I can't be out there anymore. I couldn't see him. I didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't want people break into our house and he'd get loose, or whatever it was. I just couldn't tolerate it anymore. And I'd look at him and he'd shake, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I did everything I could to get off of the street, and I literally had no idea of where we were going to go. I didn't know what the world looked like outside of that. I'd never,
Yeah.
but I knew that I couldn't have him be the victim of that. And so by trying to take care of my dog, I was able to take steps for myself that I would never have had the ability to do. So,
Wow. Wow. Wow.
it just a lot of a lot of where this was born from is really just heartfelt and emotional based. But I mean, there's a lot of intense work that goes into it, and a lot of like meetings and planning and all of that to make it like safe and steady. It's a very legit like organization with a lot of like all of our you know we're fully insured. We have our books in order. We got our, all of our policies down. But the real truth of it is it's shining from my heart, like this is where it came from, you know. And,
Yeah.
I got to tell you, we're run entirely by volunteers. And, we recently, we just opened our Rocket Dog Rescue Urban Sanctuary. It's a little old vet's office in East Oakland. And we wanted to be in Oakland because it was an area that really needed the help the most. You can't even walk out of the door without finding stray animals running everywhere. And, you know, um, we just knew that we needed to be where we were most needed. So, um, it's really interesting. You walk in the doors here and it feels like home on so many levels. I It's amazing. So we have probably about 30 to 40 volunteers each week that come in the morning and at night and do shifts and take care of the animals. They take them out for jogs. They make them special meals and treats. And it, it's just, they're here doing laundry and paperwork. And it's just an amazing, it's just almost unbelievable. you know.
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah,
Y-
yeah. Wow. And tell me, you know, if you were to, if you were to win the vote for the donations, where do you think the money? I know where it would go, but where do you think it would go? Like, where would you spread it around?
Well, because we're able to maintain our volunteer status, being run by volunteers, every dime goes to where it's needed. And, we've got, um, we help with all kinds of veterinary emergencies, animals hit by cars, people that are struggling, just trying to make it through the pandemic, that their animal, needs something and they can't afford it. We help with that. We're helping a woman right now that she's got really bad cancer, and we're babysitting her dog for a year while she goes through cancer treatment and going back and forth. So every dime that we have goes to these programs and to support direct people and direct animals, spaying and neutering. They're just we're trying to impact the amount of animals that are just pouring into the already overcrowded shelters. So, I'm really proud of how far we can go with the money that comes in. We're really able to put it to good use, and there's no way I could do anything that I'm doing right now without those donations coming in. I mean,
Sure.
I'm so incredibly grateful to everybody, and for the support, you know. But yeah, so every donation that we have goes into bettering the life of an animal, saving the life of an animal, helping a person that's an elderly person, or a person that's just in a state of distress that needs help with their animal.
I do. This is amazing. This is amazing. I'm going to just check and see if there's any questions there. Hold on one moment. One moment. No, Peggy, this has been amazing. It's so cool to hear your story, and I'm so excited to, yeah, see where this can go.